Hello everyone and welcome to the last talk of the day for a very various talk for the end of the day, I think. So it's a bit of follow-up of the talk that just happened an hour ago of my colleague Bram, which went into a very high-level topic about security in general, like what you should pay attention as a business owner and as using Odoo. So the title is Unveiling the Most Common Security Issues. It's a very fancy title to say that we will go in depth today in the code that we see a lot in Odoo about vulnerabilities. That it's real examples that our developers added in the code and we needed to fix afterwards. And so like it's a very good example of what not to do and actually like real cases that you need to pay attention to. Like I didn't invent anything, it's real example that we fixed many years ago, so I can show them publicly without any reason to be afraid, but it's real examples. If you have questions at the end of the talk, there is the link with the QR code there, and my colleagues will be happy to ask me the question you are wondering yourself. So the first chapter, so I will basically go from chapter to chapter. Each chapter will be one vulnerability. The first chapter is about public and private model methods. Before it wasn't even a chapter, like I was just telling a reminder that what is a private method, what is a public method, and what you should and should not do. I made it a full chapter because we see more and more apps on the App Store not knowing the difference between a public and a private method, and it really causes issues. So what is a private method? And here we are speaking about methods on models. So when you are creating a model inside Odoo, is that a private method is prefixed by an underscore. By putting the underscore as a prefix of the method, you say you cannot access that method through the XML RPC or the JSON RPC API. You can only call it internally through another method or through a cron and things like this. On the other end, any method which is not starting by an underscore is considered public, and it can be called externally as internally. And so the rule here is that when you are designing a new model, when you are creating new methods on your models, you should always prefix them by an underscore, like always, you do not even think. And when you will need it to make it public, because you need to use it in the web client or you need to use it through the XML RPC API for an integration outside of Odoo, then you remove the underscore. And when you remove the underscore, you will say, okay, I'm doing that removing because I will make that method public, so I need to pay attention to what contains that method. Like, did I did a sudo? Did I added a sudo? If you added a sudo, you need to pay attention to what it is doing. All of this is because the more public methods you have, the more public methods you put in your models, the more possibilities you give to attackers to attack your database. The more public methods, the bigger surface attack you have in your database. And so here it's an example that I made up, but just after this slide it will not be an example that I made up, with the first one prefixed by that underscore, and that method, both methods are simply setting the groups of your user. So basically the first one is rather okay if you use it only internally, and you, how to say this, like you put static groups, like you will not have a public method which will just forward the attributes, like you have an internal method putting static groups, for instance. The second one, on the other hand, it's for sure not good at all. Like you are giving the possibility to portal users of your database to set their own groups, meaning they can become administrators through such a method. And you might think that, okay, but portal users, they don't even have read access, or they don't even have write access on the REST user, so they shouldn't be able to access that method. The thing is that in this case, the very first thing you do is a sudo. So there will be no access write checks at all, no read, no write, no delete, no anything. The first thing it will do is that sudo and then that write right away. And so your portal users will be able to grant themselves administrator, and then if they are administrator of your database, it's the end. As simple as that. Now, it's a real example of that we found in one of the app of the App Store from my colleague here, Bram, who found this while reviewing one of the app of the App Store. And basically with this, it's an API through the SQL database. Like you can do your own select, you can do your own where. If you want to insert something, you can insert something. If you want to update something, you can update something. And so it's a very good example of what not to do. And what is the problem here? Like the very first example, the very first thing they shouldn't have do is to make it public. Like they would have put this private. Well, it's not to us. We don't really see the point of such a method, but at least you would have put the prefix, the underscore prefix. It would be less of a trouble. With this, again, a portal user can do anything to your database, become administrator, read all the data of your database, and it's the end of the world. And it's a bit join what my colleague said in the previous talk, that you need to, if you are using a third-party application from the App Store, you should pay very attention to what you do and use pen testing. Like hire a company to do pen testing of this third application. Our code, it goes through a very intense security reviews, the OCA modules as well, so those are fine. But if you are using a third party that you don't trust, you need to do pen testing on it. The second chapter, it's about using the cursor wisely. What does it mean? Is that so you have the possibility to make SQL queries to your database directly, but we provide a framework. It's not for nothing. Like the goal of this framework is to avoid you to do mistakes. And so here we have an example. The first bad thing is that, again, it's a true example. The first bad thing is, again, that method is public. We checked at the code, there was no reason to have that method public because it was called only internally, there was no button about this one. And then the second thing, which is a mistake, is that they used simple Python templating string to build their SQL statements. And with this, a user would be able to pass a SQL injection through the resIDs attribute and then to do a SQL injection in your database. And it's kind of the same thing as the previous slide, the previous vulnerability where you have access to the full database, to the full SQL database of your server. What you can do with this, so here I give the example exactly about what they can do. There it is. So basically you need to end the previous request cleanly. If we have a look there, it was ending by in beginning of a parenthesis, and then the %s there is the resIDs parameter that you pass. And so the goal of this injection would be to end the previous statement cleanly. Then you add whatever you want, you do your injection, and then you restart it cleanly. Like this part is basically the end part of the previous request. There is also another trick, like this is actually complicating my work. Like you can also put a double dash and it will comment the rest of the query. And so it's a way to do a SQL injection. And in this case, it's a very simple case. It will just display all the hashed password of your database. But you can do way more than just a select. You can do an update and, for instance, replace the password of the administrator. And then you can just log in as an administrator in the database of your victim. What you should have done instead of using that manual SQL statement is that you should first think, okay, what could I have used the framework for this? And the answer in this case was yes. There was no reason to use the manual SQL statement. You could just have used the framework. It would have worked perfectly. There are good reasons to use manual SQL statements, such as performances, reports, and so on. And so there are ways to build manual SQL statement safely. That way is, for example, the SQL wrapper that we added now in Odoo 17. Before there was other ways to do it, but since Odoo 17, this is the way we recommend and the way we force all our developers to do. Like any new pull request doing a manual SQL statement needs to use the SQL wrapper. Why is this safe? Is that because when you are building your query with the SQL wrapper, it will escape all the things that needs to be escaped to avoid the SQL injection. Compared to before, where you could pass the parameters through the parameters of the SQL, the execute, like before you would have put the parameters just there after a second or third or fourth parameter of the execute. The advantage of the SQL wrapper is that now you can pass name of tables and name of columns, for instance. And it makes it 100% safer, while before the cr.execute and passing parameters, the where clause as parameters, it was, let's say, 99% safe. It depends how the table name and the column name, if they were accessible to users or not. Normally it shouldn't be the case, but again, as I just said now, normally you can never know. So it's just better to use the SQL wrapper, because with this it's 100% safe, whatever happened. There are still ways to wrongly use the SQL wrapper, such as doing a simple Python templating string. Like you just open your SQL statement and then use the standard Python templating string, and then it would be a problem as well. In the CI security of Odoo, it's not possible. Like as soon as you will submit this, like submit that error to the run bot, we have a CI security that will ensure that the first parameter that you put in the SQL wrapper is a static. It's a string without any variable. And that's basically it for the SQL statement. So the goal of this talk is also to think that when you are doing a review, I should pay attention to. What are the keywords I should pay attention to when I am reviewing a pull request? And in this case, as soon as you see a cr.execute, you need to pay attention. You need to think to yourself, could I have used the framework instead? If not, did I use the SQL wrapper correctly? Did I use the SQL wrapper at all? Third chapter about do not over sudo it. Like in Odoo, there are sudos everywhere, and it's very hard to review those ones. So each time you are putting a sudo, there is kind of a checklist that you need to think about, and you always need to review twice what you are doing. Like put a sudo yourself, review it yourself, then ask a colleague to review it in addition to you, to make sure that you have both brains, both pair of eyes, to make sure that there is no problem with that sudo. And so, for instance, I have this example which comes from a code like from 6 years ago, I think, from internally. And where is the problem in this one is that, so it's a controller that you can call, in this case, as a portal user, and you have that post there. That post is controllable by the user. He can put anything. It's a dict where the user can put anything they want. And that post is passed directly into a sudo write. Basically, it means that the user can write on itself any fields he wants. And for instance, he could write his own groups and again grant their privileges to become an administrator. Technically, in this example, it's not really true what I just said, that he can grant his group, because it's an HTTP route, and within an HTTP route, you can only pass strings. So you cannot pass an array to say, okay, here are my groups. But you can write on any other fields, which is a char, which is a text, which is HTML. And it's a problem. I made that simple example of what a user could do despite he can only write on char fields. And in this case, we are just writing on the ref. There is another example where you can write on the description where it's an HTML field. And with that HTML field, it's displayed in the form of the user. And so let's say that the salesman accesses the description of his customer and there is a link. You can put any link you want, and it's the beginning of a phishing. And as you may know, most of the hacking we have nowadays, the beginning, it's a phishing. Like 98% of actual attacks in the IT world, it's a phishing. The beginning is a phishing. So yes, it might seem nothing that you write on an HTML field. It's actually a very bad thing. What they should have done to prevent that issue is simply that you shouldn't provide arbitrary fields in this case. Like, you should make a whitelist of what the user can write on itself. Like as soon as you put a sudo and you do a sudo write, you might think they cannot pass an arbitrary model, they cannot pass an arbitrary fields, arbitrary IDs, and things like this. So in this case, it was missing a whitelist of what the user can write or what the portal can write. And if we think about the feature which was behind this code, it was simply that in the profile, like in the user profile, a user should be able to change his own name and should be able to change his own email. But that's it, nothing else. So what can happen in worst cases of a misplaced sudo? You can read a lot of sensitive data, like you can read password, you can read tokens, you can read private data of your customers. You can create administrator, you can grant administrator to other users than yourself, or in a very simple case, you can replace the email of the administrator and then ask for a reset password of that administrator. It seems nothing, but it's very bad to have such a thing. Like you can protect yourself with a TOTP for the last one. Like you would say, okay, my administrator, they all have TOTP, but let's say that you put the TOTP by email, it would send the code to the email of the administrator. So again, it's game over. A very specific case that you need to always pay attention to, it's the attachment. Like when you are doing a many-to-one to an attachment, in this case attachment ID, and then you are very tempted to do a related to that attachment data. Related in Odoo, they are always read as sudo. So there is no sudo in that code, but there is still a problem that you can write any attachment ID you want, like a user can write any attachment ID they want, ID1, ID2, ID3, and then they will be able to read the data through that related field because it's read as sudo. So they don't need any access, they will be able to access the data. And for the data. And for example, within odoo.com, any of your colleagues would be able to read your payslip. It's a simple example, but you would be able to know how much your colleagues are paid. So here is a simple checklist. When you do a sudo read, there shouldn't be arbitrary models. When it's a read, no arbitrary record, no arbitrary fields. Create model value, write no arbitrary model record values, and a search. There is an additional thing that you need to pay attention to, is that if you provide a way to pass the domain and you want to force a domain, let's say you want the user to be able to read his own messages but not the other messages of the database, and you want to force a domain, you should connect that force domain with a domain.end. In version 18 it was expression.end. Why? It's because otherwise you could do a domain injection, and it's a bit the same as a SQL injection. You can cancel the previous domain, the force domain, and then put it any domain you want. And you would be able to bypass that protection of the force domain and read any message you want in the database. Master the access rights, and it will be, I think, the last chapter of this one. This talk I'm giving to developers every month, because I need to raise the awareness to all the developers at Odoo about security. And those slides and those examples, they are public. So if you want to go later and see all the examples contained in this presentation, you will be able to access the slides. I will make them public. We have no problem making these slides public. So records. In Odoo, you have two types of access right management. You have first the access right. It's the first layer of rights in Odoo. Like you tell, this user can access to that table, the entire table. You say a salesman can access the lead, but currently with only the access right, he will be able to access all the leads of your database. And you don't want this. You want, in big companies at least, you want a salesman to be able to read his own leads and not all the leads of the company. What you need then is to use a record rule. It's the second layer of rights in Odoo. It allows to refine the access right you just gave before. And so with those record rules, you will be able to restrict the records a user has access to. And in this example, let's say that you are a salesman. It's the second rule. You would be able to access your own leads or the leads which are not assigned. If you are an administrator, there is the additional rule telling he can read any leads of the database. And then there is that blue one on the top. What is that blue one? It's a global rule. It's a rule which has no groups. It means that it's applied to everyone. And what is complicated about those record rules is that the global rules, they are applied with the AND, and the group rules, they are applied with the OR. Which means in this case, if you are a salesman, it's all the leads of your own company and my own leads. If I am an administrator, it's all the leads of my company or and the leads I am assigned on, or all the leads. And this is what allows, this is the mechanism that allows to grant more and more access rights. One thing that you need to pay attention to also is that when you grant access right, when you do an access right, you give rights. When you do a record rules, you remove rights, you do not add rights. It's a bit complicated to understand, especially those checkboxes. Like when you are designing a record rule, you might think that if I check those boxes, it means that I only grant to those record rules to a user. It actually means that it doesn't apply. If you uncheck it, the record rule doesn't apply. So let's say that I remove the first one, I remove the read. While I gave the access right to read, it means that there are no record rules at all for that model, and it means that I can read all the records of the database because I gave the access right just before. And I have an example, I will quickly go through it. So basically here we give a full access right to the group portal. Then I have an access rule, but the permission read has been put to false, so it means that it doesn't apply. And then you have this model with, again, a related field to the email of the partner. So if I combine the three, like I combine the access right, I combine the record rule, and then I combine the model which is given, it would allow an attacker to dump all the email of your customers of your database, because the portal has access to the whole table, and then you can say, I will put ID 1, I will put partner ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then read emails one by one, and then you will be able to dump all the emails of your database. So what you should do to avoid this, either you do not give access to the portal and you just use controllers and you add sudos carefully where you need to, either you really pay attention to the ACL and the record rule you put. For instance, if you are giving all the access, read, access write in the access write, then in the record rule you should always have at least one record rules for each checkbox. And you do extensive reviews and you do unit tests as the attacker, like, am I able to read this, am I able to write this, and things, and so on and so on. As I said, I have many other chapters, but I will not talk about this today because I'm out of time, and I will just take your questions.
Right, we received 5 questions. The first one is, what are the security capabilities for AI LLM used? What are the possibilities to have a model on-prem to maximize security?
So the AI, it's a very new topic. Like, even us, we are not fan of it, but we have to deal with it. It's a thing that it's the market. The market wants AI. We have no choice than to put AI. So currently we try to give as less data and as less action we can to the AI. For instance, we do not give the full database to the AI. Like, let's say that we take the feature about sorting documents. You make a prompt telling, okay, if this document contains an invoice, you can send it to the group, and then you do a / command telling that folder. So you will only give the name of that folder. You will not give any other data. There is the thing that there is the feature about summarizing emails and summarizing full conversation. In this one, what we could do, like, we could try to anonymize the data before sending it to the AI, but it's very complicated to find within a list of messages where there are private data, where there are sensitive data, where is the name of the customer. And a lot of services are already doing that, doing summarizing meetings and so on. So for this, we have currently no other choice than to trust those LLMs. So we trust ChatGPT and we trust Gemini. There is also a checkbox in ChatGPT that you can check telling, do not use the data I feed you to learn. Like, do not remember the data that I send you. And so this checkbox you can just uncheck. Of course, it doesn't mean that ChatGPT will respect it, but at least you did the thing you should have done.
All right. Then do these SQL queries issues also imply migration scripts and hooks?
Well, the thing is that it's our own. Now it doesn't really apply because you can actually a bit, yes. Like it followed like in any case in the reviews of an upgrade script it followed the same rules. So there is the CI security, and we review the SQL statement from the upgrade script the same way as any other development. So there wouldn't be. But I would say that yes, because if you upgrade a database where there is a SQL injection, let's say in the name of the partner, and someone added some SQL injection in his name while subscribing, it would apply. So yes, to me it applies as well.
All right, and then to follow up, how can I enforce globally the use of two-factor authentication or SSO so that single password login is not possible anymore?
So there is the module which is called, it's a setting that you can add in the general setting to force the TOTP. It will only force email. Like if the user didn't set up the TOTP by app, it would force the TOTP by email then. And that's it. There is no real way to force the TOTP by app.
All right.
But by email.
If related fields are always sudo, what's the use of compute sudo on related fields?
To disable it. Like if you know that there is an issue, you can disable it.
And by what should we replace your example, attachment _?
It's true that I didn't mention it. So what you should do I still have it there? The thing is that with attachment, by definition in the model, if you have a look to the model, it contains res model and res ID. So you don't really need that many-to-one in the first place, because if you need attachment attached to your model, it's already it's a bit the definition of an attachment in Odoo. Like instead of a many-to-one to attachment, what I would recommend is to use a field binary without that related, because it would create an attachment by default, but it would handle the access right correctly for you. So the solution in this case would simply to not do the many-to-one, to not do the related, and just do fields.binary, and that's it. That solves the solution. Let's say that you need absolutely to access the record itself, then you can do a search on here attachment with res model, res ID, and that's it.
And then one more, because we're out of time. Really.
Yes.
Where will the presentation be available?
This I'm not sure of, but but I will find a way. Let's say on the description of the topic or something like this.
And the other questions you can answer in the pad?
Yes, I can answer the question in the pad, of
Perfect.
course. See you,
much.
and see you at the party for people coming at the party.